I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here tonight with Bergen County Chad. Everyone who I've been chatting with and working with, Ellen and Joni and Andrea, everybody, you guys are absolutely fantastic. So thank you guys so much for having me tonight. It's a privilege. And I'm excited. Definitely a great turnout, just like Ellen described. This is exactly what I do now. I travel the country and internationally, training entire school districts and parents and other groups on the most up-to-date research on ADHD and executive functioning. So, ADHD is truly one of those neurodevelopmental disorders that is just so unbelievably misunderstood. This is why Dr. Russell Barkley, who I'll talk a lot about tonight, describes ADHD as the Rodney Dangerfield of neurodevelopmental disorders. It gets no respect and it's misunderstood. And it's very important that we really understand what ADHD truly is. And we hear about ADHD and executive functioning, and these words are used pretty interchangeably. So let's really talk about, what ADHD truly is, executive functions, and all of that. And I'm going to mute my headphones during the presentation so I don't hear any feedback or anything happening in the background. And then I'll turn the sound back on. And then at the end, we'll have a nice Q&A and a nice discussion. But like said, my name is Michael McLeod. I am the owner of GrowNOW ADHD. You can find my website, GrowNOWADHD.com, on Instagram, GrowNOW ADHD. There's my daughter Eden. I always give her a shout out at the beginning. That's a picture of her when she first sat up. She's 2.5, almost 3 now. She had her first haircut an hour and a half ago. I showed everyone the picture. Everything's for Eden. So I always like to start my presentations with this lovely quote. It would be nice if you would leave your behavior at school so distracted and absent-minded, and your poor interest in all I teach set a bad example for the whole class. So some of you may know this quote, and some of you may have a general idea of who this quote is about, but it is about a young Albert Einstein. Teacher's comments to a young Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, who had very severe ADHD, did not do well in school, massive behavioral issue, but things turned out pretty good for him. So I always like to give a nice shout out to my references and my sources at the beginning of my presentation, because this field of ADHD is so small. It's such a small little niche of individuals that consider themselves ADHD and executive functioning experts. And I like to, give shout outs to some of the people that I really look up to, and the individuals who I consider to be like the Mount Rushmore of ADHD and executive functioning research. The first, of course, is Dr. Russell Barkley. He is second to none, the best of the best. He recently retired, so he no longer answers my emails, and it's very frustrating. But he is a great man. Type his name into YouTube and watch his unbelievable lectures, listen to the podcasts he's done, and read his books. Nobody has published more books, more research, more peer-reviewed articles than Dr. Russell Barkley. So no one has done more for this field than he has. So if you want, true evidence-based, real data on just how serious ADHD is, on medication, on effective strategies, on what individuals should do once they're diagnosed, what you should do if you have a loved one with ADHD, Dr. Russell Barkley should be your go-to, because that's real information, not social media nonsense. Go with real Dr. Russell Barkley. The next is Sarah Ward, who's based out of Massachusetts, I believe. You can find her at efpractice.com. A lot of her work has really become a gold standard for executive functioning research. So if you ever see her name pop up or have an opportunity to take one of her lectures or one of her classes, I highly recommend you jump on that. You can also type her name into YouTube, listen to some of the podcast interviews she has done. She's absolutely incredible. She's a fellow speechologist, just like myself. That was my background training. My master's degree is in speech and language pathology. So I truly have a great love for her work and all that she's done for this field. She's amazing. The next is a really good friend of mine, Ryan Wexelblatt, known as the ADHD Dude. He puts out just incredible content for parents, and he does these dude talk videos for individuals with ADHD themselves. So type his name into YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. He has an amazing parent membership site. So parents can sign up and do these self-paced videos to learn how to, improve dysregulation in the home and to, really help your child with ADHD. So he's incredible. And the work he does is amazing. Him and I have a parenting ADHD podcast coming out soon. So him and I are going to, put together a podcast on parenting ADHD. So definitely check out Ryan's incredible work. Next is the Harvard Center of the Developing Child. They're the ones who are really on the forefront of this incredible research that tells us what ADHD truly is. So definitely check them out and some of the great research they're doing on ADHD and executive functioning and resiliency and toxic stress and all that great work they're doing, the brain scan studies. Definitely check them out. They have a great website and it's very easy to read. The next, of course, is the one and only Chad. I have done so many different Chad presentations. I have worked with so many different Chad groups. I am a firm and true and honest believer that as soon as a child gets an ADHD diagnosis, the very first thing that doctor, that neuropsych should do is give that parent information on their local Chad chapter, period. That should be the first thing that doctor or neuropsych does. The fact that there are individuals diagnosing ADHD that don't even know what Chad is an absolute travesty. Chad does unbelievable work. The parent support groups, the social groups, these sorts of lectures and professional development, I think it's absolutely incredible. So the work Chad does is second to none. They're amazing. I've worked with really incredible Chad organizations. Bergen County Chad, you guys are the best. So please keep doing what you're doing, and let's keep making Chad more of a household name. Okay, so let's dive into this. We're going to talk a lot about executive functioning and internal skills. And one of the most important things for us to discuss is that executive functions truly are the greatest predictor of success we have for human beings. These executive functioning skills are the greatest set of skills we have to know if this individual is going to be able to leave their parents' house, get a job, keep a job, live in a place, pay rent, have money, make friends, keep friends, be able to live independently and have a successful life just like their parents did before them. Of course, it's so important that we recognize that this term success is a subjective term, right? Success means something differently to each unique individual. It doesn't necessarily mean you live in a mansion and have a yacht and those things. Some people just want health and happiness and a family and live in whatever home that they choose. But the ability to live an independent life without being reliant and dependent on others and getting jobs, keeping jobs, making friends, keeping friends. This is executive functioning skills, not school, not grades, not homework, not GPA, not a college degree. It is executive functions that are the greatest predictor of success we have. And it's time that we discuss what executive functions really are, because still to this day, when I mention executive functions, people still think it's time management and organization, which is an outdated viewpoint on executive functioning, period. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So I mentioned earlier the Dr. Russell Barkley studies, the Harvard Center of the Developing Child studies, these unbelievable brain scan studies that have been done that let us know really what ADHD truly is. This is so incredibly important. We now know that individuals with ADHD, this is a true neurodiverse population. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is a disorder of the brain. And yes, social media makes us not want to use the word disorder anymore, but ADHD is a disorder and it needs to be taken seriously. It is a true disorder of the brain, and all of these brain scan studies have shown it. Individuals with ADHD have a different brain than the neurotypical population. So these brain imaging studies confirm that these brains are different, and they are different in all three specific areas: structure, function, and development. The ADHD brain is more structured in a more disorganized way. The communication between the different areas of the brain is much more disorganized and not fluent. The brain functions in a more chaotic way, and it develops slower than the neurotypical brain. So it is an overall delayed brain maturation. So this ADHD brain in all three major areas: structure, function, and development. This is not a couple of small changes here, a couple of small changes there. This is a true neurodiverse population, a true neurodevelopmental disorder. So this prefrontal cortex of the brain has smaller, less active, less developed brain regions. We all know this prefrontal cortex is the home of executive functions. This area right here, right behind the forehead, that's the prefrontal cortex. And we know that's what does the executive functioning. And we also know that is the last part of the brain to develop. The brain develops over just about 30 years from back to front. So the back of the brain is the first to develop, and the front of the brain is typically not developed until between 25 and 30 years old. But within this ADHD brain, we see reduced regional volumes in 5 overall regions. So we're starting to be able to now pinpoint, because this incredible technology and these incredible studies, what parts of the brain are affected in ADHD. Okay? And these regions that are affected and reduced, smaller, less active, less utilized, are the same parts of the brain that deal with emotions, self-awareness, and self-regulation. The limbic system, the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, much smaller in ADHD. Okay, now we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern here, aren't we? We're seeing a little pattern of emotion, self-regulation. There's an emotional aspect going on here. The anterior cingulate, where we make our social and emotional decisions, much less activation, less active, less developed in ADHD. So now we're throwing in a social component along with the emotional component. So we have 5 regions of emotions that are smaller, less developed, less active. And if you look up the DSM-5 and you look up the diagnostic criteria of how to diagnose an individual with ADHD, how much are you going to see there about emotions? We have a couple of ADHD specialists here, right? Yep. Yeah, there you go. 0. Not a lot, right? So that's exactly it. Okay. So you're going to see a lot about attention, a lot about hyperactivity, a lot about inattentiveness, but we're not talking about emotion. And all the parents out there who have a child with ADHD know that ADHD is all about emotion management, self-regulation, less activation within this frontal lobe overall. Okay. So what we also know, because we discussed right here previously, how the anterior cingulate, which is crucial in social life, is smaller in ADHD. We now know that this prefrontal cortex is a social organ. You need this prefrontal cortex to make friends and keep friends. You need it for your social relationships. The way Dr. Russell Barkley describes the prefrontal cortex is like a giant Excel spreadsheet in the brain listing every single person you've ever met. Who's a friend, who's family, who's an acquaintance, who's a coworker. How do they make you feel? How do you make them feel? What do you owe them? What do they owe you? Listed all out in an Excel spreadsheet, keeping track of all your relationships, right? We need this prefrontal cortex to manage all of our relationships, because this prefrontal cortex is the source of self-regulation and motivation. So we know that the prefrontal cortex is a social organ, and it's common knowledge that the prefrontal cortex is the home of executive functioning. But what does this prefrontal cortex do that makes it the home of executive functioning? No one ever asked that question. People just say, oh, prefrontal cortex, executive functions, that's it. But what does this prefrontal cortex do that makes it the home of executive functioning? Humans are the only species that can sustain a behavior over time in the absence of a direct consequence. So humans are the only species that can work towards something now, even though the direct consequence is not staring at them right in the face. A positive consequence they want to attain or a negative consequence they want to avoid. So we can work towards something now, even though it's not going to affect us until a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, or a year from now. Like, for example, applying to college, studying for the SATs, getting your driver's test, different things like that, that are not going to affect us until very far down the road. How? Because this prefrontal cortex gives humans the ability to pause. We have the ability to pause, and in this pause, we can stop and think, which is what I refer to as the most vague phrase of all time. Stop and think. But what is stop and think? It is stop and use your executive functioning. Stop and use your internal skills and aim your behavior towards the future. That's executive functioning in a nutshell. When we do something now to aim our behavior towards the future, to better our future selves. So this is what the prefrontal cortex does. That's what makes it the home of executive functioning. It gives us the ability to pause, stop responding to all of the external stimuli around us, focus on the self, stop and use the internal executive functioning skills, and aim what we're doing now towards our future selves. We have the ability with this prefrontal cortex to create and sustain motivation even with a delay. So that delay is huge to this neurodiverse ADHD brain. Delay is huge to utilizing the executive functioning skills. So now we're getting to the point now where start to think about your loved ones in your life with ADHD. Start to think about yourself if you have ADHD. How do you do when there is a delay? Think about that delay. How does that delay negatively impact your self-regulation and self-motivation, your emotional state, and your social relationships? So executive skills, ADHD and executive functioning, we're using these terms really interchangeably. These executive skills have been identified as the foundation that all children need. These are crucial life skills, period. This is not, oh, I have strong executive functioning, I have weak executive functioning. These are crucial life skills to live an independent life, period. Kids need them, teenagers need them, adults need them. Obviously, adults need them the most. But there are ages where it is appropriate to be supervised, to need help. But executive skills are true life independent skills, the greatest predictor of success that we have. And these brain-based skills become more and more critical as children venture into the world and there is decreasing parental supervision and guidance. So we know elementary school is lots of support. Middle school, you start to have different teachers for every class. And high school, you have lots of freedom and lots of independence. So as adults fade back and kids need to step up, the only reason kids are able to do that is because of the development of the brain and the strengthening of executive functioning skills. And like I said earlier, these skills develop as the brain develops from back to front, with that prefrontal cortex being fully developed between 25 and 30 years old. Okay, so here's a really interesting list to look at, especially if you're a parent here tonight with us. A really interesting little list of what do these lagging executive skills look like, right? So here's a really interesting list of what I tend to hear the most. So still to this day, when people hear executive functioning, they think that it's a school-based skill. It's something only needed for school. They think it's something, that's helpful for work, helpful for college. And it has a lot to do with the backpack and folders, doing homework but not turning it in, difficulty starting tasks, completing tasks, you know? And this is ADHD treatment in a nutshell. This is the focus on ADHD and executive functioning for decades and decades as this external behavioral-based disorder. Executive functioning is just starting and completing, time management, organization. So this is what I hear from parents all the time about their complaints about their kids' executive functioning. But it's so important we learn to dive deeper. So here's something really interesting that I want parents to start to think about. Every day looks the same for them. They go to school, they go home, they stay home. Start to think about this a little bit if you're a parent. When was the last time your kid did a non-preferred, varied experience? Are they trying to stay into that little tiny, what I refer to as the ADHD comfort zone? Do they want every single day to look the same, where they're in complete control? Do they stick to the three main food groups of Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite? Is that really the main areas that they're sticking to right there? They go to school, they come home, they go to the basement, and they're in that basement as long as they can, and their life revolves around screen entertainment, which then causes them to have a lack of true, diverse, face-to-face social experiences. I'm not talking about calling, texting, Discord, or online video games, which are not real social experiences, period. Sorry, but they're not. Okay? So start to think about this a little bit. Every day looks the same for them. They're trying to stay within that narrow ADHD comfort zone, not gaining life independent skills. So one of the best ways to describe ADHD, which is Dr. Russell Barkley's way of describing it, is how the brain is separated into two major areas. The back is where we know. The back is where we learn, we know, and we have our information. Okay? So like we know, for example, that when we walk into the library, we have to be quiet. We know that when we get home, we have to start our homework. We know that when we see someone we care about, we have to stop and talk to them. We know that when our room is getting super messy, we have to clean it. We know we have to put the phones away and go to dinner. We know that if I curse at my mom, she's going to take my phone and screens away. We know, we have the information, we know, but then the front of the brain is where we do. The front of the brain is where we perform and where we show what we know, where we use our knowledge and we perform in the natural environment. So what ADHD basically does is it splits the brain in half between knowledge and performance. And this is exactly why the vast majority of individuals with ADHD have an average to above average IQ. And we all know about our gifted, twice exceptional population, right? Those individuals that get A pluses on every test without even paying attention, but they are really lacking in social executive functioning and executive functioning skills. So intelligence and IQ have nothing to do with ADHD and EF. You can know, but you can't do. You can know that when you walk into the library, you have to be quiet. You can repeat it 10 times before you walk into the library. But once you're in that library, you're distracted by the first shiny object in the room. And you go right towards being loud and not doing what you're supposed to do. You know that if you break something in your house and scream and curse and go nuts, you're going to lose your screen time privileges. Doesn't matter. This is exactly why if you're a parent with ADHD, you may have noticed that the typical consequences and punishments don't work so well with your kid, do they? All of those lectures and monologues and words and language you've thrown at them, they knew it all along. They knew it all along. You've exhausted yourself lecturing your child on a daily basis, throwing so many words and words and words and words at them like parents do best. They knew, but they're not performing in the natural environment. This is what ADHD and EF does to the brain. Okay, so what are the three predictors of success? What does research tell us? What does longitudinal research tell us? Longitudinal research is studies that have been done over, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So we've been studying human beings in terms of success for a very long time. And we now know that executive functioning is the greatest predictor of success that we have. But let's get a little bit more specific. What are the three true greatest predictors of success for human beings? The first is the ability to independently form and maintain social relationships, real social relationships, not online relationships. And this one cannot be understated or underestimated in any way, shape, or form. When we look at the true importance of this, it's basically food, water, shelter, relationships, period. Real face-to-face relationships. And boy, do kids with ADHD struggle with this. And we talked about it, why, in the brain, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into it as well, because there's a little thing called social executive functioning, not social skills, not eye contact and turn taking and topic maintenance, social executive functioning. Perspective taking skills, which the ADHD brain really struggles with, which is why it's hard for them to maintain relationships over time. But no one ever does anything alone. No one goes anywhere in life alone. It takes a village. We all get there with the help of our friends, right? We need to maintain and form social relationships, and these cannot be online relationships. These have to be real relationships, face-to-face, where they go out and do things together. So unbelievably important. Yes, kids are still doing that these days. The next, the ability to independently manage your emotions. This is so unbelievably important. We all, at some point in our lives, have worked with someone in the workplace, with someone that was unable to manage their emotions. We've all been there. We've all done this. And that person didn't get very far in that job, did they? That person didn't do very well at that job. We all get to a point in our lives where we have to learn how to manage, control, and self-soothe and self-regulate, because we are eventually going to be surrounded by others that are able to do it in professional workplaces or at a college or in society, in a community, where we have to be able to manage our emotions independently. Okay, we all have to have our own ways of self-soothing, self-care to manage our emotions and not let them get the best of us to the point where we are making others uncomfortable or affecting our own reputations. The ability to manage your life and independent problem solving. The ability to manage the stresses of your life, the needs of your life, for when to grocery shop, when to reach out to peers to maintain that relationship, when to pay the bills, when to do all of those things, when to manage your problem solving, when to know when to get a new job, when to know when to move or when to reach out for help, those kinds of things. True independence. So these three main skills all involve the word independence, all the ability to do something on your own without having to ask your parents to do these things for you. Independence is the name of the game here. And all three of these are executive functioning skills. So I talked about how in the past, ADHD was looked at, and executive functioning were looked at as external behavioral-based disorders. We still have this term attention deficit, and we still have people hyper-focused on hyperactivity, kids who can't sit still, inattentiveness, kids who daydream, kids who can't focus. We still have people thinking that ADHD is an external behavioral-based disorder. We still have people thinking that executive functioning is just time management and organization, which created a system of ineffective therapies and ineffective programs to help kids. First, we have that beautiful red countdown clock, which was beautifully marketed to families of kids with ADHD. They made a lot of money off that red countdown clock, right? And it's useful for, it has its time and place, yeah, But what is it not doing? It's not building independence. I don't think your child with ADHD is going to love that red countdown clock so much and bring it to them on their wedding day to help them get ready on time. Okay? Those red countdown clocks are pretty much always used by the parent. The parent is setting it, and the parent is setting it up for the child to let them know how much time they have left on tasks. It does not develop independent skills. It could help with behavior in the home every now and then, sure, but it's not strengthening internal self-regulation and internal time management. It is not strengthening skills. It is making kids prompt dependent on the red countdown clock. The next is a watch that will vibrate and remind a child to pay attention and remind them to raise their hand. Once again, making them prompt dependent on that device. The third picture there on top is the first ever FDA approved iPad game to help cure your child's ADHD. That is 100% real. You can look it up. It's called Endeavor RX. It is an absolute joke. Please, if you are an ADHD coach here tonight and one of your parents recommends it, please keep them very far away from it. It is unbelievably expensive, and they've actually done the impossible with this game. They've created the first ever video game that kids don't want to play. So that's pretty much the number one thing I hear from families who have tried this game, is that it is so bad and it is so stupid that the kids actually don't want to play it. So it's a great way for pharmaceutical companies to make a lot of money off of ADHD. Okay, so please, hopefully people can stop asking about that. The next is a morning checklist and a reward chart, which we know have their time and place, but we do have to start to focus on internal and intrinsic motivation and self-regulation. And then we have a young boy using Amazon Alexa to set reminders. Okay, has its time and place, but is the kid doing it on their own without their parents prompting them? So in the past, we know that we only focused on external behavioral based for both ADHD and executive functioning, which led to this intensive focus on organization and time management. Now we know we have to look at the internal. We have to look at long-term skill building instead of just accommodations. And what do most public schools do when there's an ADHD or executive dysfunction diagnosis? They tend to give a 504 plan. And kids will get preferential seating or extended time on tests, which are great, but those are not always going to be accepted at every college and every workplace and all of those sorts of things. So a lot of these copy and pasted from Goal Bank 504s are really not helping the child long term. If we're just focused on accommodations, great, but where's the internal skill building? Where's the true respect for this neurodiverse brain to help them strengthen up this developmental delay, strengthen the internal skills, and build independence? Where's the exit plan for this 504, for this IEP, for all of this coaching, all of these therapies? When can my child be expected to be successful on their own and make it to college and not sit in their dorm on Minecraft all day and actually make it to class and know to go to the library to get work done and check their school email, right? Since the creation of 504s and IEPs, we've seen a massive rise in first semester college dropouts of college students. And many of them had IEPs and had 504s and got the grades to get into that college because they did very well with all of those accommodations and all of that support. But there's no college on this planet that's going to match the amount of supports that an IEP or 504 can give you. So if we're just going to throw accommodations at people and never actually look to strengthen the skill, we're setting them up for failure later. So let's start to look. There has been a major push now by Dr. Russell Barkley, Dr. George McCloskey, Ned Hollowell, Sarah Ward. We need to change this name of ADHD. It is not an attention deficit. If anything, these individuals have an abundance of attention. I have ADHD myself. It's not a deficit of attention. It's an abundance of attention. You have too much attention to give, and you're responding to all of the stimuli in the environment. It's really not about attention at all when you come down to it. We focus so much on attention because we looked at the external behaviors. And it's not about hyperactivity. It's not about inattentiveness. ADHD is an executive functioning developmental disorder, period. There is no one or the other. ADHD is the preeminent disorder of executive functioning. Still to this day, I have parents call me and say, hey, my son has ADHD, and he's also really struggling with executive functioning. There's no and also. They are one in the same. Can you have executive functioning problems and not have ADHD? Absolutely. You can be depressed. You can have trauma. You can have bipolar. You can have autism. You can have so many other things. But if you have ADHD, you have executive dysfunction. But you can have executive dysfunction and not have ADHD, of course. So let's dive a little bit deeper now into the pillars of ADHD and executive functioning. The first is self-regulation. So we're not going to talk about hyperactivity anymore. We're going to talk about self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to regulate your emotions, your language, your body, your behavior in various environments towards various stimuli. There's also been a very large push to change the name of ADHD to self-regulation deficit disorder, because this truly is all about self-regulation, not about hyperactivity and kids who can't sit still. They can't internally self-regulate. Not about inattentiveness and kids who can't focus. They can't internally self-regulate because of their brain differences, because of the much lower levels of the neurotransmitters, dopamine, vasopressin, serotonin, oxytocin. It's hard for them to self-regulate. The next is self-awareness. This is a huge one. And this is why parents call me all the time and say, hey, my son needs executive functioning coaching, but there's no way he's going to agree to talk to you. He just thinks he has a nagging mom that's on his back all the time. So he thinks there's no problems at all. He thinks I'm just crazy. ADHD is a disorder of self-awareness where you don't truly understand your strengths, your needs, your likes, your dislikes. You're not self-aware enough to know, hey, I need help. This is why kids with ADHD struggle so much with self-advocacy. You can't self-advocate unless you're first self-aware. Hey, I need help. Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, I'm not doing things after school that everybody else is doing. I don't have as many friends. People don't really seem that comfortable around me. People aren't including me in things. We have to be self-aware. We have to be able to perceive our environment and be self-aware of our strengths and our needs. Self-motivation, when it comes to ADHD and executive EFDD, executive functioning developmental disorder, what we need to know about self-motivation is that it is self-motivation towards non-preferred tasks. So once again, when I'm always talking to parents, they'll say, no way does my son have a self-motivation problem. He can play Fortnite for 15 hours in a row. Self-motivation towards homework, towards chores, towards going outside, towards exercise, towards anything that is new and non-preferred, anything that is not instantly stimulating. Self-motivation towards new, non-preferred tasks, anything outside of the narrow ADHD comfort zone. Self-evaluation, the ability to learn from past experiences and apply it to the present moment. The ability to re-image the past and think of times you've been in similar situations and gain confidence and competence from it. And also the ability to learn from past experiences and not repeat mistakes over and over and over again, using that hindsight aspect, which we'll talk more about. So the ability to self-evaluate and take a bird's eye view of one's actions, language, body, and behavior, to self-evaluate yourself based on hindsight. So these right here are the 4 pillars of executive function, and then they are all founded upon self-language, which are the internal skills that I refer to. So now we are moving away from hyperactivity, inattentiveness, attention deficit, time management, organization. There is no time management and organization without first being self-aware, without first being able to self-regulate, without first being able to self-motivate towards that non-preferred task. No kid's going to learn how to clean their folder, clean their room, clean their locker, study for a test, try something new, unless they're first self-aware, unless they're first self-regulated, unless they're first self-motivated. This is what we're missing. We've spent decades giving these kids checklists and timers and lectures to create these external systems that go nowhere, that fall by the wayside, and yet another failed expensive therapy. We have to bring our focus into the internal skills. Let's strengthen the internal so that we see external progress. Okay? And it's so important that we talk about how executive functioning is the greatest predictor of success that we have. And everyone in the past thought it was just an academic-based disorder. Executive functioning is about academics. It affects kids at school. It affects test grades and homework and their thoughts and feelings towards school. But guess what? There's also home executive functioning. What's home executive functioning? In most cases, it's self-regulation towards parents. And all you parents here tonight, I'm sure you're agreeing with me. You are your child's safe people. No one knows how to take more advantage of an unconditional love relationship more than an ADHD child. So once they realize, hey, my parents are always going to love me. My parents are always there for me. They're always going to provide for me. This is not a fragile relationship like a teacher or a peer or a classmate or a coworker. This is someone that's going to be there for me no matter what. So I can be at my worst towards my parents. So there's home executive functioning, self-regulation towards parents, and also the ability to complete non-preferred tasks in the home. Are they only on screens and cell phones and video games all day in the home? Are they only doing preferred tasks in the home? Are they trying to control everybody in the home based on their own interests? Or can they complete non-preferred tasks in the home? Then there's social executive functioning, which is the true set of social skills. So this neurodiversity movement, one of the strongest and best things it's done is get us away from these ridiculous social skills and make us think a little bit more about executive functioning. Eye contact is complete garbage. Nobody should ever be working on eye contact. Neurotypicals don't do eye contact. Turn taking, topic maintenance. How about perspective taking skills? How about situational awareness and the ability to read the room? How about social reciprocity and 50-50 relationships? How about social relatedness so you can more intimately relate to others? So executive functioning is going to affect all areas of life, academic, home, and social. And yes, there are some people that will thrive in one area and not be so good in one or two of the others. But most often we see individuals struggle in some way in all three areas. So one of my favorite definitions of executive functioning is Dr. Russell Barkley's definition. And this is his definition of what executive functioning truly is. Executive functioning is what we do to the self. Remember before we said we pause and then we stop and think. So executive functioning is when we take an action to the self designed to change oneself, to change self's future. So we stop focusing and responding to the outside world, and we learn to focus on the self. So instead of responding to external stimuli like the internet, like the cell phone, like what the Xbox, the Switch, the PlayStation, the TV, or there's mom there, let me emotionally manipulate them and create the argument vortex. Let me stop and pause and think about what I need to do now to better my future. Hey, I have a test tomorrow. I should probably study. Hey, my room is a mess. I should probably go clean it. Hey, I haven't spoken to this friend in a while. I should probably reach out. Hey, I'm a senior. I better start applying to colleges and finish that Common App. When we take an action to the self. Hey, I'm feeling pretty angry right now. I better go for a walk. I better listen to music. I better watch some funny videos instead of yelling at people and making them feel my emotions. And how do we measure the progress with executive functioning when it comes to internal skills? So if we're having this focus from external to internal, how are we going to measure progress? How do we know that this coaching approach, this therapy approach is actually working? So we do this by going from prompt dependence on the outside world to independence. And this is exactly how we write all of our goals. Johnny will utilize self-regulation safety plan with fading prompts towards independence. And there's a little thing called the prompt hierarchy. You can Google and download the pyramid of the prompt hierarchy. And we go from maximum to moderate to mild prompting all the way down to independence. So this individual might start with maximum prompting and need full maximum support. We teach them the internal skills. We'd fade back adult support. And the goal for Johnny will be to eventually be like, he's going to start off where the teacher's going to say, Johnny's looking like he's starting to get pretty upset. I better go remind him of his choices and bring him to the sensory gym, or bring him to the self-soothing area, or take him outside for a second. To eventually, Johnny's able to say, hey, I'm getting upset. Let me think to myself what my choices are for my cool down plan, and let me pick one of those, go do it, and come back to class when I'm ready. And the teacher and the adults in the class have to do nothing. Johnny will utilize self-motivation plan to initiate, persist, and complete math homework with fading prompts towards independence. Everything has to be about fading prompts towards independence. Adults fade back, kids step up. So really, what executive functions are the ability to stop yourself from what you would have done on impulse without stopping to think. So there's that word impulse that we think about so much with ADHD. Oh, he's so impulsive. He's so impulsive. He's so impulsive. But the reason they're so impulsive is because of the inability to stop and think. The ADHD neurodiverse brain is built in a way, in structure, function, and development, that it thrives on stimulus response. Stimulus response. There's a stimulus, respond to it. There's a stimulus, respond to it. Which is exactly why these kids are so unbelievably prone to screen and tech addictions. This is why parents have to be very, very careful before they choose to have an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Switch, a cell phone in their house. This is why schools need to rethink this weird experiment they're doing on kids by giving them Chromebooks and MacBooks at school and iPads, which has completely been a massive failure so far. Okay, so this whole stimulus response, it's the exact same. The studies have been done as it's the exact same thing that a gambling addict does when they're in a casino. Stimulus response, stimulus response. And if you are a parent of a kid with ADHD and you have an Xbox sitting in the open at your house, or a computer with open access to the internet sitting in the open in your house, you're basically making your house a casino, because they don't have the ability to stop and think and delay gratification and keep themselves from what they would have done on impulse. Teaching these kids to stop and think instead of being stimulus response is huge. So when a child is prompt dependent, The adults are acting as the child's executive functioning system. The longer this is done, the longer the development of these skills will be delayed. So the parents here tonight, think, how much are you your child's executive functioning system, and how can you learn to fade back? So executive functions are used as an opportunity to turn away from the seductions of the moment and defer gratification. The only way to defer gratification is to learn how to self-regulate. This is self-regulation deficit disorder, not hyperactivity, not inattentiveness. It is internal self-regulation. Okay, so let's very quickly go through what these internal skills are. Why does the ADHD brain do stimulus response? Why does the ADHD brain split between knowledge and performance? The first is the foundational skill of executive functioning, which is nonverbal working memory. All executive functioning starts with nonverbal working memory, period. There is no executive functioning. There is no independence. There is no internal success without nonverbal working memory. So all of the work that we do with our kids with ADHD and executive functioning challenges has to include the principles of nonverbal working memory. Nonverbal working memory is the visual imagery system of the brain. It is the movie theater of the brain, the DVD player of the brain that allows us to make mental movies, to visualize pictures and movies in our brain. It is both our hindsight and our foresight. We've all heard about how we all know that kids with ADHD are time blind. They're stuck in the now, right? Why are they time blind? Here it is. Because they don't have a hindsight and they don't have a foresight. And if they do, it's really grainy and weak. So the ability to re-image the past and learn from past experiences and apply it to the present moment. So they're making confident and confident choices. So they're feeling confident in their choices because they know they've been through something similar in the past. And then their foresight, the ability to visualize the future and know what's coming so they know what to do now. If I don't get this really boring, really hard homework done now, I'm going to get in trouble tomorrow at school. Or they're at school, they visualize themselves doing their homework, so they actually know what to put in their backpack. So this is the reason for the time blindness, the lack of mental movies between hindsight and foresight. And then after nonverbal working memory comes verbal working memory, which is your basic internal language system and the ability to use self-directed talk, the ability to have an internal dialogue. And one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Russell Barkley is, what you say controls what you do. Being able to have an internal conversation with your brain. And I have spoken to so many adults with ADHD, and they basically say, I don't have an internal voice. I don't talk to myself. If I do, I'm just thinking about my favorite movie, or I'm thinking about my favorite YouTube video. I don't use my language to direct my behaviors. So we refer to this as the brain coach, when we talk to our brain to direct our behavior. And nonverbal and verbal working memory need to work together in harmony. Visual imagery and self-talk together. So if the future looks like that, nonverbal, then right now I need to do this, verbal, self-talk. And in the ADHD brain, both of these systems are weakened and disconnected. And these are the internal skills we need to strengthen. So once these two systems are working together in harmony, nonverbal and verbal, the individual then learns to internalize their emotions and not externalize all of their feelings. They learn to internalize their emotions. We're not saying to hold their emotions in and withdraw their feelings and not feel their true self, but they're able to think things through, self-soothe easier, self-regulate easier, and respond more as their best self. And then they learn to internalize their motivation. They learn to be able to motivate themselves internally so they're not forever reliant on star charts and sticker charts. and external things. And then, of course, the highest form of executive functioning is play. Executive functioning in and of itself is play, period. Another thing, and we know that when kids are really young in preschool and kindergarten, we know the most important thing for these kids to do is play. Why? Because they learn to share, because they learn social skills, they learn to be flexible. No, it's because that's the foundation for all executive functioning. Play. Kids 21 and below need to play. And play is not just with trucks and blocks and toys. Play is going out and doing things face to face with others and having experiences with others, because play is executive functioning. All of that manual play that kids do with blocks and trucks and toys and all those things becomes internal play. And internal play is executive functioning, planning, problem solving, and creativity. Creating multiple different scenarios to solve a problem. It's all about play. There's a great podcast called the Huberman Lab podcast, and he talks about executive functioning and play. I highly recommend you listen to that, because executive functioning is play. And we live in a world of rising screens and rising electronics, and we are seeing play disappearing. And along with play disappearing and kids going from bikes to the basement, we've seen massive rates. We now have an Adderall shortage. We now have a rising ADHD diagnoses, whether they truly have ADHD or not, who knows? But it's very, very important that we recognize that as play has declined, we have seen an increase in school refusal. We've seen an increase in ADHD diagnoses. We've seen an increase in anxiety. We've seen an increase in dysregulation behaviors.
Okay, Michael.
Yep.
Hi, it's Ellen.
Hello, Ellen.
Hi, it's 9:03.
Yes, it is. All right. So I will just very quickly just pull this one slide up with my information here.
Okay, so
cool.
We want to also leave enough time for questions.
Of course.
And so I'm sure you were going to talk about play and developmental levels and all that stuff. And it seems like you have so much to offer. But if we could have some questions now, and maybe we'll have you come back and talk some more. Just to let people know, we do record this, and it will be posted on our website, probably by tomorrow, the latest the next day, on our YouTube, which you can access through our website. Our website is Bergen County Chad, www.bergencountychad.com. And okay, so Mike, how about if we open it up for questions? Are you ready?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. People want to either, put your video on and raise your hand, or put your question in the chat. That would be fantastic.
Is there a way to motivate kids to do homework with ADHD? That's a big struggle for me with my daughter.
So that's a very common question. And what we do in our parent coaching programs is to shift parents' thinking. So many parents instantly go to that thought of, how do I get my kid to do X? How do I get my kid to do the task? What you want to start to ask yourself is, what is my kid doing instead of the task? So you want to start to ask yourself, oh, are they playing on their phone? Are they playing on their Xbox? Are they playing video games? Are they just surfing the internet? So what you want to do there is you want to focus on the environment and not your child. Look at the things that they're running to avoid homework. Look at the things that they're doing. If they're playing video games or on their phones or surfing the internet, you're going to want to remove those things from the home immediately. So all of the things that they're doing that's keeping them from doing the task they need to do, their responsibility, their accountability, they then lose access to those things that they're using instead of doing the task. And if that's not working, there needs to be a program developed with the school where homework is done at school, period. Whether it's during the day, in the morning, or after school, they get picked up late, bussed home late, whatever it may be, where homework is done at school and nothing is expected to be done in the home.
Okay, well, we don't allow the iPad. My daughter's 8, so I don't allow those stuff, but
Excellent.
it's still a struggle. With math, not so much. Reading is a big struggle. And I agree with you, because when we weren't using the Chromebook to read, it was so much easier. The fact that they want them to read on the Chromebook is a big struggle. Like I'm
100%.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm actually going to speak to a teacher about actually reading physical books instead of reading on the Chromebook.
You should definitely get that in her IEP or her 504.
Okay.
There's been few accommodations I've seen more beneficial to kids with ADHD by doing less of their work on the Chromebook. I've actually worked with some kids that their Chromebook has been fully taken away, and parents have to get past the whole idea of them being alienated or them being the one kid in the class that doesn't have the Chromebook. Once they get past that little mental hurdle and say, hey, this is what's best for my kid, after a couple of weeks, they see a brand new kid. These kids simply cannot handle Chromebooks, period.
The thing is, because we don't allow the iPad, she'll go on the Chromebook to do things that we normally don't allow. Then it becomes a fight. Versus before,
and you can't blame her.
When everything was paper, it would just get done.
100%. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
There's a question that somebody wrote into the chat. They are asking, can EF coaching be effective if done virtually or online? They'd love to have their son work with you, for example, but they live an hour away.
Yes, we do virtual sessions. We do virtual sessions with students all across the country and internationally. If virtual sessions are done right, they should be absolutely nothing like virtual school during quarantine. Virtual school was very content-based and lecture-based, and executive functioning coaching through Zoom is not lecture-based and not content-based. It is tailored towards the unique individual. So it's not math, science, social studies, it's one-on-one coaching. So I can tell you right now, based on the students we work with at GrowNOW, we see no difference in progress whatsoever, whether it's in person or online.
I have a question. Hello, Michael. Thank you so much for coming. The language that you speak of, talk to self, I really am interested in that. Can you give some more examples, please?
For the verbal working memory?
When you talk, you were talking about overriding and talk to your brain to know what to do, and the visual imagery and self-talk, that kind of overlapping the two, having them interact. So you mentioned the research about people with ADHD not talking to themselves. So I'd be if you could be kind enough as to give some examples, that would be great.
So what we do is we refer to this as the brain coach with students. So we talk to them about how their brain is their brain coach, and there is a voice in their head that might be, the volume might be turned down a little bit, and they need to learn how to have an internal dialogue with their brain. So this is something that we do as adults all day, every day, without even realizing it. So as adults, you're laying in your bed. Before you even get out of your bed, you have your entire morning routine done in your head. I need to get out of the bed. I need to get dressed. I have to brush my teeth. I have to get the coffee. I need to get in the car by 8 so I can get to work by 8:30. If there's some traffic, I can get there at this time, whatever, those sorts of things. So we do this all the time. So you as the parents, what you want to start to do is to model your self-talk, externalize your self-talk around your kids so they can hear it, but have direct conversations with your child about their brain coach, where you can start to say to them, hey, take 5 seconds, take 5 minutes. I'm going to go walk away. Have a conversation with your brain coach about why you're not going to play Minecraft tonight, about why you need to do your math homework, about why you need to go outside. Have a conversation with your brain coach, and I'll come back in 5 minutes. So you're going to want to start to teach them to have more of an internal dialogue before having these externalized behaviors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some other questions. I just want to get to it before it gets too late. Somebody else is asking, do you work with any adults who have ADHD as well?
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Yep. Definitely. My email's right here, mike@grownowADHD.com. So just shoot me an email and you can chat directly with me on the phone tomorrow.
Ellen, we have a hand raised as well. Just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Can you, I
Sure,
can't
you want me
see.
to- Sure, Liz, do you want to ask your question? I think you're on mute, Liz.
To unmute. Mute, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. I work with high school students with ADHD at a private school. And a lot of what you're talking about with removing Chromebooks, I just so strongly disagree. Once they're in high school, if they're lacking keyboarding skills and research skills and technology skills, they can't keep up with 21st century curriculum. So I could understand your point maybe for younger elementary school students, but at a certain age, at what age do you say, they have to have a Chromebook in order to keep up with our society?
So my response to that is that, technology has always been one of those few outlier things where the younger population is always better at it than the younger population is always better at it than the older population. So we live in such a screen-based world. Let's be honest, these kids are going to have computers at home. They're going to have cell phones in the ADHD in the high school age groups. So these kids, to think they're not going to be able to type on a keyboard or not be able to research or those kinds of things, to have a Chromebook on them 24 hours a day, I think we've seen so far that this Chromebook experiment has done more harm than good. Yes, the ability to do this, the ability to do that is important. There's no reason why there can't just be like a computer lab at school where they go and they're on the computer, they have a lab and that's it. There's no reason the Chromebooks need to be on them 24 hours a day.
Okay, let's see if there are any other questions in the chat.
So there's a question, Julie said her son recently said he can't have cell and laptop in his bedroom overnight. And she's wondering if this has become an addiction for the ADHD as well as for those with ASD. Could you respond to that?
So he's saying he needs to have it in his room, is what he's saying? He
said he cannot have the cell and the laptop in his bedroom overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. I think there's been mountains of it.
Right?
Yeah, there's been mountains of evidence showing that, the blue light from phones and being exposed to screens affects the ability to have deep REM sleep, which we know is super, super important. And we see that, too much screen use, affects your ability your brain to slow down and achieve that deep REM sleep. I've worked with so many families where they're so concerned their kids aren't sleeping, their kids aren't eating. And it pretty much 99% of the time, 10 times out of 10 can always be reverted back to the students over excessive screen use. If kids are on screens far too much during the day, they're not going to be able to sleep well, which then causes them to not be able to eat well and creates other problems, of course, with that. So yes, I totally agree. There should be, 18 and below, as long as that kid's living in your house, there should be no cell phone, no computer in the home, in the bedroom, and maybe an hour or two before bedtime.
Okay, so it's 9:15 and we do like to end on time and be respectful of other people's time. I don't see any of the, well, there's one new message. Let me see if we can quickly answer that. KR says you've identified the problem, but what is the solution? Children cannot raise themselves. There has to be structure, rules, expectations, goals, and loving relationships. Is that something you think you'd like to come back and respond to?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you do it in a minute or two? Give them,
Oh yeah. So there's so many. Each individual with ADHD is a unique individual. So that's the most important thing to say. So yes, there's many different problems identified, and the solution is not going to be a very quick fix. The solution is going to be possible medication, which you need to talk to your physician about, and it's going to be parent coaching. And when parents try new techniques, you're going to see an increase in behaviors before you see progress. So this whole idea of a quick fix solution is kind of what social media and TikTok has done to us. You know, these things take time. Progress and growth is a marathon and not a sprint. So just saying do this, do this, do this, that's a solution to ADHD and executive functioning. You know, there's a long list of, you know, hundreds of thousands of various different solutions. So there's many different ways, but I think tonight we talked about visual imagery and self-talk and different ways to focus on that instead of creating checklists and creating external systems. So I think we did talk about some solutions this evening.
Thank you so much. Michael has posted his information if you want to get in touch with him. I also want to thank Roberta for reminding people that the CHAD virtual conference starts tomorrow and Wednesday. We were just at the in-person conference, which was amazing. Michael will be speaking at the conference Wednesday. You're going to be talking to parents. So check that out. I think there's a link on our website. And if not, you can look at the CHAD website, chad.org. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you soon at one of our support groups or at our next month's speaker series. Happy holidays to all.